The newest AP poll dropped on Monday, and the voters got it right. That top 6 elite group is exactly who it needs to be. But there's a Big 12 team lurking out there just waiting for an invite to that party.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily college hoops show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Schade, and I want to welcome you into today's show, in which we will be talking about the Big 12 games from Big Monday. Woo, Texas Tech, what is up? As well as Baylor beating West Virginia. Alex Dono of Locked On Canes joins me to talk about Miami's victory over North Carolina. But before we get there, we've got poll reactions from the AP poll that dropped on Monday. And very first, sometimes life comes before sport, and such is the case today as we wake up following the news of Monday night, in which there was an active shooter situation on the campus of Michigan State University. Unfortunately, 3 people lost their lives. 5 others were transported to a hospital. And as of the time of this recording, one of the latest things that's happened is that police did find the shooter and he took his own life. I cannot continue to see this happen over and over and over again. My heart breaks. I've prayed to the Lord to have, Lord have mercy all night long. And friends, we have to do better for our country. I don't know right now what that is or what that means or what that looks like, but we need to continue to work towards a better country. And I know and I believe that we can do that. And so if you are a person of prayer, I would encourage you to continue to pray for these families and this campus and all involved, and that we can move forward in a better way. As to how that impacts our show, obviously there's the college basketball tie-in. And so you might have heard that Michigan State is on a 48-hour pause. And so for our purpose, that means the men's team was supposed to host Minnesota tomorrow night, Wednesday night. That game won't happen. And then the women's team was supposed to be at Purdue on Wednesday, and that won't either. And so we look for more reports and more to come out of that. No real way to pivot well. And so let's just make the hard right turn and get into some AP poll reactions. The top 3 is exactly correct, for my opinion. And you know what? That's the only one that matters. No, I'm just kidding. But seriously, the top 3 was the exact 3 teams I wanted in the exact order I wanted. If I was playing Wordle, they would not be yellow squares. They would be green. Right teams, right order. If you tuned into yesterday's show, you heard me talk about that. I thought Alabama right now has the best resume following Purdue's loss to Northwestern on Sunday. And then Houston second, followed by Purdue bringing up the rear there. But the order is not the most important thing of these 3 to me. To me, the most important thing is that you have those 3 as your top 3. And then that beyond that, the next 3 beyond, Alabama and Houston and Purdue, that this next group, there's another group right behind them as well. And so the most important thing to me right now is that we do have, I believe, a separation of 6 teams up top, and then a group below them, which I think can fluctuate in a whole bunch of different ways. And of those 6, I would divide them in like 1A and tier 1B. You've already talked about Bama, Houston, Purdue. Again, order's not enough, although give me Bama right now over the other 2. But if you're out there yelling at me, hey, Isaac, I want to make a case for Houston, or I want to make a case for Purdue, I'll hear that, and I will not argue with you. I mean, clearly, you look at the AP poll, 22 people gave Houston a first-place vote, and 2 gave Purdue a first-place vote to Alabama's 38, if I remember correctly what that was. So no argument for me if you want to flip that order around. I just think those are your top 3. And then that next tier, 1B, 4 through 6. In some order, UCLA, Kansas, and Texas. In my top 5 that Andy and I put out yesterday, I had Texas 4, UCLA 5, Kansas 6. And I know Texas lost on Monday night. We're going to talk more about that here momentarily, but I would still have them in this group. I might fluctuate the order of that a little bit now and bump UCLA up to 4, and then Kansas, Texas. I mean, seriously, I could sit and look at these 3 teams just like the top 3 and move them around and switch them out and in and out. All I care about is that they're in spots 4 through 6 and that we have that top 6. Really looked at those 3 hard, UCLA, Kansas, and Texas, and I would have been comfortable any order, but I do firmly believe that group of 3 is a tier below the top 3, but also a clear tier above what comes after them. And so the question for me becomes interesting. And I posed this to my co-host Andy Patton on the show yesterday, but I didn't answer it. So I want to talk more about it now. If I gave you that group of 6, and again, it's Alabama, Houston, Purdue, UCLA, Texas, and Kansas. If I gave you that group of 6 versus the field for the national championship, who would you take? So that 6 versus the other 357 Division I teams. All the math says you take the field clearly. My heart wants to say the 6 because I think those are the 6 most caliber and quality teams. Obviously, I've been talking about them. I think that the AP poll has them right as the top 6. But given the wild parity this year, I've got to take the field. I got to go with the math and the head knowledge there. And part of this for me is because you've got candidates right on the doorstep outside of that top 6 who I believe are national champion caliber this season. Those teams I might not think are national champion caliber in other seasons, but they are certainly this season. Now, if you change that question from national champion, those 6 versus the field, to those 6 versus the field, and the criteria is that 3 of the 4 number 1 seeds are going to come out of that group of 6, I'd probably actually say the group of 6 for that one. And that's because there's a big difference in a resume, a big difference in a body of work across the entirety of a season versus the variability of a one-off NCAA tournament format where any of those 6 could get knocked off, especially this year, in any game. But if it's, hey, you're looking at where things are at right now, and a couple weeks from now, who's going to be the number 1 seeds, I think you could easily draw at least 3 of those as your number 1 seeds right now. And so if you're asking me that question, I would answer it differently. But if you're saying national champion, those 6 versus the field, give me the field. That's tough. Now, for example, for me, I teased it off the top that there's a Big 12 team I thought is right on the doorstep of joining that second group, that 1B group, and that's Baylor. For me, they are moving up, and they're on the outside looking in, but I think they're very close to being in that group with UCLA, Kansas, and Texas. More on that in just a minute. I do want to, as part of the poll reaction, I want to give you a team I think is too low and a team I think is too high. Number 1, the team I think is too low is Creighton at 18. They have now reeled off. Creighton has, are you ready for this? 8 straight games, including UConn, Xavier, Providence, and Villanova. Now, they've still got, they got to play Marquette again still, but the schedule rounding out the season for Creighton is not too difficult for them. But we're talking about right now, should they be higher than 18? And for me, that's yes. I would have them not like top 10, but inside my top 15, probably 13 or 14. So like a 4 or 5 jump up from where they're at right now. I think Creighton is too low. And I would hope I do feel that way, because last week on the show, I talked about I would take them as my Big East pick to win the regular season right now. And the team I think is too high is this team. I just feel bad. I feel like I've been dumping all over this team, but it's Tennessee, who comes in at 10th in this week's poll. I think that's too high for them. They've lost 3 of 4, and that one win that they had was that one against Auburn that sent college basketball back to the peach basket era, quite frankly. And listen, I know that the 2 most recent losses are both buzzer beaters, and I hear that. I do hear that. But again, as good as Tennessee's defense is, and it is phenomenal, number 1 in the whole nation, that offense is wildly inconsistent. So Say it with me once again, all together. Don't trust Tennessee. And moving forward, tomorrow, Wednesday, they host Alabama. And then on Saturday, they got to go to Kentucky. And I know, whatever with Kentucky right now. But you tell me they're not going to be ready for that game? They're going to be ready for that game. Hopefully, they'll have some of these injuries back. I know CJ Frederick was out. Severe Wheeler's been out, those kind of things. But, man, that current streak of losing 3 out of 4 could very easily turn into losing 5 out of 6 or losing 4 straight for Tennessee if they're not careful. And so right where they're at right now, I think they are a little bit too high to have them a little closer to 15, just because that's what they've been showing, and I think that's where they should be. We want to get into the Big 12 games that happened on Big Monday on Monday night with Texas Tech knocking off the Longhorns and Baylor keeping their winning ways going. But first, this episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Are you looking for a delicious treat, but you don't want all the fat and calories? Then you got to try a Built Bar. We just got through the holiday season, and I know my goal is to eat a little healthier this year. So if you're like me, where you want to do that without compromising taste, then Built is for you. Seriously, you got to try it. Why? Why do you have to try it? Why is it so good? Because these bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. And check out these flavors: churro, peanut butter brownie. I don't know how to decide between that. And I'm not sure how Built does it, but these macros are always spot on. Just 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and yet 17 grams of protein. And now you don't have to wait around to get your box from Built.com. Why? Because now Sam's Club and Walmart both carry Built bars in store. So run on down, get you a box today, or a big old bulk one if you're going to Sam's Club. Get some of these bars, try them. You won't be disappointed, I promise. Because Built Bar is great and a proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. All right, Monday night, the second time slot of Big Monday, Texas Tech upends the number 6 ranked Longhorns in Lubbock, 74-67. We'll get to Baylor in a minute, but let's go here first. Davion Harmon, career high 25 points on 9 of 17 shooting. And Texas Tech just comes out and does it. I mean, it felt for the majority of the game like, oh, the Red Raiders are about to take this thing. I even tweeted like, Texas Tech's about to mess around and win this game, and they did. But here's what's interesting. They have been written off kind of like we did with Baylor, kind of like we did with Oklahoma State for the way they started, not started, but endured the majority of Big 12 play this season. But now, let me rattle off for you Texas Tech's last 3 road games. You ready for this? Iowa State ranked 13th in the nation at the time. They won 80-77. Texas Tech did. Their next home game after that, they hosted Kansas State this weekend, 12th in the nation, beat them 71-63. And then obviously last night in Lubbock, the numbers just keep getting better. Iowa State 13th, Kansas State 12th, and now Texas 6th, and they knocked them off 74-67. And you kind of hate it with all the Chris Beard scenario, because if Chris Beard had been in this game and Texas Tech did that, that place was rocking already, but can you imagine if Chris Beard had been on the sideline coaching that game and Texas Tech did that? What a scene. What an absolute scene that would have been. So it is not only 2 straight home games for Texas Tech now, but 2 straight victories overall, because Kansas State at home Saturday, and then this win over Texas on Monday night. And so the question becomes, and I think it is a little far-fetched at this point, but I'm going to ask it. Is there a world in which you could put this team into the NCAA tournament? And again, I do not think you can or should, especially given where they're at right now in their roster. Because at some point, even despite numbers, and I guess their numbers aren't necessarily where they need to be. They're down in the 60s, for example, at KenPom. But at some point, the number of losses have to matter, and that's just a fact of the matter with Texas Tech. I know in this conference, as good as it is, you're going to have teams that just take the brunt of it, and that's been Texas Tech this season. But from just a how good are they really standpoint, especially now, like how good is this team? Because quite frankly, there are multiple of these Big 12 lower tier right now, Big 12 teams that I'd rather see in the tournament. And I feel like they'd have more success than some of these other middling high major teams that are middling with their middling records in conferences that aren't as good as the Big 12. Here's a couple ways to look at what I'm saying. If you put Oregon or Florida in the Big 12 this year, who do they beat? I think they are down doing Texas Tech stuff or worse. Or put another way, take Oklahoma State or West Virginia or Texas Tech and put them in the Pac-12. And I'm not saying they're knocking off UCLA every night, but they're competing in that top 3 or 4 of the Pac-12, these bottom Big 12 teams. I legitimately feel that way. That's not like me just blowing smoke. I legitimately feel that way. And so what Texas Tech's doing, like, I just love to see this, that they, despite their troubles, despite people hopping off the Mark Adams bandwagon left and right, they're continuing to fight for their team. And speaking of Harmon, I mean, you saw him after this game, how emotional he was because of the victory. Well, I promised you we'd get back around to Baylor, and here we go, because I want to look at them. They win in Waco on Monday night, 79-67 over West Virginia, who themselves is really a strong basketball team. But what does this mean, this victory for Baylor? Well, you combine that with the Texas loss we just talked about, and guess who's tied for the Big 12 lead now? The same Baylor Bears that started off conference play 0-3. Both of them, Texas and Baylor, are at 9-4 in conference, a half game ahead of Kansas, who's sitting right now at 8-4. And then right behind them, you got three teams all tied for fourth at 7-5. Iowa State, Kansas State, and Oklahoma State. I guess you got to be a state to get into that fourth place race right now. But you look at this game of Baylor's, and it's kind of a microcosm of why you can start to legitimately once again believe in their capability and what they can do, and why I'm saying, hey, they're knocking on the door to move up into that Tier 1B with Texas and Kansas and UCLA. But it's not a formula we haven't seen before from Baylor. It's what they've been doing these past couple of years. Dominate with elite, quick guards who can shoot, have guards who can defend really well, and know and trust and play together, and then have a couple big guys who are at least capable. And so you look at it, LJ Cryer leads the way in this one, 26 points on 8 of 12 shooting, 8 of 11 from 3. Are you kidding me with that? No. That's insane. And then Adam Flagler, not to be passed by, has 13 points on 5 of 9 shooting, 2 of 4 from 3, and perhaps most importantly, 6 assists. But he was not the leading assist man. That was the freshman, Keontae George. Now, George didn't have a great scoring game like he often will do. Just 6 points for him on this night, but he only took like 3 or 4 shots. But here's how Keontae George did affect the game, is he found ways to contribute in a major way, even when his shot isn't falling. So 6 points, short, great. 9 rebounds, 7 assists, and 4 steals. That's from your freshman. Come on. That's incredible. Oh, and by the way, Jonathan Tchamwa is now back, and he scored 11 points on an insanely efficient 5 of 7 shooting from the field, plus 3 rebounds, plus a block, plus a steal, plus an assist. Not back in the starting rotation yet, but he out-minuted Flo Thamba 24-15. So he's coming back, and if he's ready to go, watch out for Baylor. And so why would I bump them up to that second tier with those guys? Well, they've won now 4 in a row, 10 of 11, keeping in mind what conference they play in. Now, granted, of those 10 out of 11 that they've won, 2 against West Virginia, 2 against Texas Tech, 2 against Oklahoma, and 1 against Oklahoma State. So there is that. But those teams we've just established are not necessarily bad teams. They're just not great Big 12 wise this season. Now, Baylor's closing stretch is brutal. Listen to this. At Kansas State versus Texas, at Oklahoma State versus Iowa State. I mean, if you go 3-2 in that stretch to close the regular season, you feel good about it, and probably are right still there on top of the Big 12 because everyone else is going to take an L or two as well. Well, coming up, Big Monday started with North Carolina hosting Miami, hoping to build on their win against Clemson. Miami coming off a subpar performance against Louisville, but it was that team from South Florida that came up and did work on the Tar Heels on Monday evening. But before we get there, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. So just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app right now. Safe, secure, and super easy to use. And then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. I've got Giannis on my fantasy team, and I'll be taking the over on all his player prop points lines this week. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet bump up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/locked-on. Once again, that's FanDuel.com/locked-on to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Well, the Miami Hurricanes have more wins than anyone else in the ACC as of this recording. 12 of them after they head up to Chapel Hill, North Carolina, knock off North Carolina 80-72. Coming right out of Carolina, had a double-digit beat Clemson over the weekend, 91-71. Alex Dono from Locked On Canes is here with me to unpack this thing. And Alex, here's where I got to start with this thing. If you're Miami at halftime, you have missed out on Norchad Omier playing most of the first half, and yet you're still up 1 at halftime. If you're North Carolina, you're only down 1 at halftime, and you're also feeling pretty good because you went 1 of 11 from 3. One team was able to make up for that in the second half. The other team wasn't. Miami comes away the victors. What did you see that impressed you from the Canes in this game?
Well, you put it perfectly. I looked at it as a blessing for Miami to have a lead, even a narrow lead at halftime, despite the fact that Omier only played 6 minutes in the first half. He got himself into quick foul trouble. And, Jim Larrañaga took a bit of a gamble that paid off to sit him most of that first half rather than risking him pick up the third foul, which it felt like he would have because he was picking up fouls at rapid succession at that point. And Miami was able to make do. And a huge part of that was Jordan Miller, who just played out of his freaking mind. And Miller, he can be a bit...
That's scientific right there. Out of his freaking mind.
That's an advanced analytic. I don't know if you knew that, but it's amazing how Miller could be very underappreciated. I know that the quote from Jim Larrañaga has been going around. He referred to him as, I think, one of, if not the most underrated players in college basketball. It's easy to overlook him within his own team because usually the headline makers are Isaiah Wong, Norchad Omier, and Nigel Pack, who had a really big game as well in this one. So just all the contributions that Miller does filling up the box score, and he seemingly knows how to step up when he's needed most, like when, Omier is missing significant time. So yeah, to have that 1-point lead at halftime, I think was big. Obviously, certainly know that Carolina can have some big runs in them, and they did make the game within about 2 minutes. A little bit interesting down the stretch. Miami was able to hit most of their clutch free throws to put the game away. But yeah,
I stayed a little nervous, but they
But and also on the flip side, you're right. With UNC being 1 of 11 for 3 at halftime, I figured it's only a matter of time before they just start burying 3 after 3 after 3, and it never really happened. I think they ended up under 15% from the 3-point line. I think 14.8% was the number that I was looking at, and so that was that I'm sure part of that was Miami's defense, but part of it was just catching North Carolina on a bad night because a lot of those were open looks that they were missing, and so the script played out very well for Miami.
Yeah, 5 of 31 were the Tar Heels from deep. That is not going to cut it. And Dono, I want to go back to something you said because Norchad Omier only 5 points in this game. Isaiah Wong, leading scorer, is held to 10 points in due in large part to Leaky Black's defense on him. I believe Wong only scored 2 points when Leaky Black was on him. But as you said, Jordan Miller, 24, Nigel Pack, 23. What does it say about Miami's versatility or ability for any one of these guys to be the dude on any given night that helps set Jim Laranjega's team apart this season?
Yeah, I think that he treats everyone really as equals. I mean, no one gets superstar treatment. And then I think another big part of it is, and Miami has been blessed with more health this season than in the last couple of years. There were so many nights in like 2021, 2022 when Miami literally only had like 7 healthy players who could actually go out there. And I think that kind of forced anyone who was available and healthy to either be a starter when they're not usually a starter or play significant minutes when they maybe weren't ready for that. And I think that kind of helped condition this team for the future because they're very complimentary. You have another kind of unsung hero, a guy like Wooga Poplar, who steps up and makes some big plays and scores 9 points in this game, grabs some crucial rebounds. Isaiah Wong, when he's on, he's one of the better guards in the country, but he can be a bit streaky. I mean, there are some games when Zay is not really playing at his best, and sometimes he can have a tendency to commit some like costly late game turnovers, and he did have, I think, at least one tonight that almost turned into a costly late game turnover. But if someone's not having their best night, someone else usually steps up. That's just kind of the way that things have gone for this team this year, especially, and of course last season when they made that tournament run.
Ooh, and that tournament run was something. Keep in mind, folks, this team went to the Elite Eight last year, and we could very well see that far, if not more, given, these guards and how dynamic they are. Never know what's going to happen. Now, Dono, Monday nights in the Big 12 and the ACC, these are the two power conferences that have to deal with these Saturday to Monday turnarounds. Interestingly, it felt like coming into this game, North Carolina and Miami had both played at home on Saturday. North Carolina, as we already said, beat Clemson by 20. Miami had a little bit of an underperformance, beating Louisville by 8. Then Miami was the team that had to travel from South Florida up to Chapel Hill. And yet it felt like they were the team that was more dynamic, despite having some of that perhaps lesser momentum coming into the game. I thought Miami's defense gave North Carolina fits, particularly how Norchad Omier showed on screen action. And so what is it that this team is able to find that allows them to rise up above potential outlying things that cause problems and say, listen, we're here and we're going to do this thing?
I wish I knew, but it's actually now been 2 weeks in a row where they've pleasantly surprised me going from the Saturday to the Monday turnaround, because it happened last week and into last week as well. That's right. Yeah, they had a nice road win against Clemson the previous Saturday, and then they just beat the brakes off of Duke 2 days after on Monday.
Right, 81-59. Yeah,
and then the same thing happened this weekend where they had not their best performance against Louisville at home. It was also like L. Ellis was just out of his mind that entire game. Yes. Like he wasn't missing anything. I think that really kind of his superhuman performance helped Louisville make the game really, really close. So they ended up being an 8-point win for Miami, but not the blowout that a lot of people expected, because they like just demolished them the first time that they squared off earlier this year. This one was a lot closer, but then they actually had their better performance on Monday against UNC. I can't really say Coach L did anything different, like with the rotations or anything like that. Honestly, I think this team is just hungry. I think something that they do kind of use to their advantage, and this is a pretty common thing in college sports, is the whole chip on the shoulder thing. I mean, they do now have a pretty favorable ranking at 15th in the country as of Monday, but for most of the season, this team has felt like they're kind of underranked and a little bit underappreciated. I mean, you mentioned they've, at this moment, they've got the most wins in the ACC, and it's really something that they don't really feel like the mass media gives them a whole lot of credit for. So I think that they use that for extra motivation.
Well, they are using it very well. And last question, then we'll get you out of here. I think it almost kind of goes into with what you were just saying there, Dono. I mean, this is an undersized starting five. In this game, you're looking at North Carolina's front court of Pete Nance and Armando Bacot, both standing at 6'11". And you got somebody like Norchad Omiers, your center, who is standing a big 6'7", shorter than 3 of North Carolina's starters. What are they able to do to overcome these Canes, their height disadvantage?
They're always in the right place. That comes with Coach Larrañaga's discipline. I mean, the way that they box out for rebounds and the way defensively they always keep their man in front of them. They don't commit a lot of mental errors. I mean, sometimes turnovers in transition, that I guess can happen to anybody when they try to move really, really quickly. But defensively, they just don't make a lot of mistakes. I mean, it's why, they're able to, despite the fact that most of the time no one bigger than 6'7" is on the court, they're still able to not get shredded in the rebounding battles. I mean, I think it goes to show you how hungry they are and the type of stuff that they work on in practice. I think through discipline and just body placement, they're able to compensate for a lot of that.
That's it for today's episode of Locked on College Basketball. My thanks to Alex Dono for joining me to unpack the Miami win over North Carolina. Folks, please make sure to subscribe to the show, smash the like button, and leave comments on your AP poll reactions as well. Well, until tomorrow, my apologies to the lawyer family. We'll talk to you then. Peace.